friends, you heard the subject, our two wars. But before I get into that subject, let me tell you about another war. A little boy went to religion class, and when he came home, his mother said to him, "What did you learn today at Sunday school?" He said, "I learned about the war of Moses and the Egyptians." Well, what happened? Well, he said, the Egyptians, he said, were pursuing Moses and the Israelites. So Moses telephoned to his engineers. His engineers laid pontoon bridges all across the Red Sea. When the bridges were laid, the aircraft saw the tanks of the Egyptians coming on the other side of the Red Sea. Moses telephoned the airfield, radioed the jets to bomb all of these tanks and the army, which they did. Then when the Israelites were across, then they bombed the pontoon bridges and Moses and the army was safe. Mother said, is that what they told you in Sunday school? No, he said, it isn't. But he says, if I told you what they really said, you wouldn't have believed me.
Travel along, Catholic pilgrims, for 1 year as we learn from Venerable Fulton Sheen, one of the greatest Catholic teachers in modern times. Join me, Amy Thomas, once a week for a short reading out of Bishop Sheen's book, Way to Inner Peace. Hello, Catholic pilgrims, and welcome to week 27. So I have to apologize if my voice sounds a little Kermit the Froggish. I have been under the weather and I have been coughing a lot, and so my voice is not where it normally is. But I didn't want to leave you guys hanging and go a whole week without a podcast, so we're pressing on and we'll just deal with my wonky voice. This week we are moving into the last reading for our section on virtue, and we're going to be talking about wars and rumors of wars. And this is a very dense reading this week, and so we're going to read through it together, but I would highly encourage you to take some time and read it through slowly and methodically on your own, because it has so much in it that is worth paying attention to and meditating upon that, we're just not going to be able to cover together today, but it has a lot of good wisdom and truth in it, and I think it deserves a second look, as all of his readings do. Definitely a second look. But the 3 points to keep in mind today are morality, decency, and virtue. Number 27, wars and rumors of wars. There are two great evils in the world, sin and suffering. Sin is mortal, suffering is physical, and the latter is a result of the former. What happens to the body as pain and to nature in the form of cyclones, earthquakes, and floods is ultimately an echo, a repercussion and effect of what has already happened in the moral universe. When the big wheel in a machine is cracked, all the little wheels get out of order. As we eliminate sin, we eliminate suffering. As we love God, we cease to hate others, and thus we engage in fewer wars. The more morality and decency and virtue there are in the world, the more peace there will be in the world. Wars are consequences of a moral rebellion. The scriptures boldly affirm that war is the result of egotism and selfishness. When civilization is made up of millions of men and women who are at war with themselves, it is not long until communities, classes, states, and nations will be at war with one another. Every world war is a turbulent ocean made up of the confluent streams of millions of little wars inside the minds and hearts of unhappy people. War is the final logic of self-will. War is not necessary, but it does become an inseparable ailment of any world that abandons the supremacy of the spirit. Nietzsche, after proclaiming the death of God in the 19th century, prophesied that the 20th century would be a century of wars. There is a possible connection between the importance given to politics and the frequency of wars. In any era of history where politics is the major interest, war is the major consequence. This does not mean that one ought to subscribe to the dictum of Karl von Clausewitz that war is the prosecution of politics by other means. It does mean, however, that since politics stresses expediency and pragmatism on a great scale, that dedication to truth and morality are minimized. Since the latter are essential for peace, war becomes a greater possibility. When the people are interested in the raising of a family, the cultivation of virtues, and the salvation of their souls, they act as a balance wheel against the power motive of politics. But when both the state and the people give supremacy to politics, the stabilizing influence of society is lost, and with it come civil strife and discord and war. There is much truth in the thesis of Peterum Sorokin that as civilization in the modern sense of the term advances, there is an increase of war. There have always been more wars than peace. From 1496 BC to AD 1861, or in 3,358 years, there were only 227 years of peace and 3,130 years of war. This makes 13 years of war for every year of peace. Within the last 3 centuries, there have been 286 wars in Europe. From 1500 BC to AD 1860, there were 8,000 treaties of peace, which were supposed to remain in force forever. The average length of these treaties was 2 years. It is likely that there was never a single year when the world did not have a war, at least in one country or the other. 2 other analyses have revealed that, since the year 1100, England has spent half of its history fighting wars, France nearly half, and Russia 3/4. It is not a very sweet pill for our civilized world to swallow, to realize that the false prophets of the last century, who predicted an evolution of man into a god, and the necessary progress of humanity to a point where there would be no more war or disease or death or wrong. And we are now living in a century of war. It behooves us all to admit that there is an evil tendency in our human nature, and that this tendency, when uncontrolled by morality and grace, will devolve more rapidly than it will evolve. It is our views of the human condition that have been wrong. By denying the possibility of sin and guilt, we have denied the very existence of perversity within us, which makes war. Not all will submit to this moral regeneration through self-discipline, but those few who will be the leaven in the mass of the world. It is not our politics and our economics which have to be changed first. It is we ourselves. It is the wars within that have to be stopped. The remaking of the world depends on the remaking of the individual. The return of the individual to God is the condition of more peaceful times. Well, I wasn't lying when I said it's very dense and packed full of a lot of things to think about. Before we really get started, I want to touch on one person that he mentions. He mentions several. He mentions Nietzsche. He mentions Karl von Clausewitz. I'm not sure I'm saying that name right, but there we go. And he also mentions Peterum Sorokin. And I had to go look up this guy because I didn't know anything about him, which is odd because he was a sociologist and a criminologist, just like I am. Now, obviously, he was at the doctorate level, but I am surprised that I've never heard his name and that I didn't study him at all in college. I have a good idea why, but it still surprises me that this is the first time I have ever come across his name. And so I had to go look up who this guy was. And I think it's important for us to understand a little bit about who he is so that we can understand why Bishop Sheen chose to reference him. So he was a 19th century, 20th century sociologist. He was Russian born, though he did have to eventually immigrate to the United States. He was a professor at Harvard, and he was very, very much against communism. And he spoke out about it a lot. That's probably one of the reasons why he had to leave Russia and come to the United States. He was married. He had 2 kids, I believe. Anyway, he had a lot of interesting ideas that I would like to look into a little bit further. I do think that he was Russian Orthodox, I believe, if I remember correctly and looking him up briefly. But his ideas are very interesting, and he was very much about family and rural life. And he felt that living in small towns and building those small communities where people come to know and rely on each other. He thought, rural life provided the opportunity for hard work, which he felt was very beneficial to people. And I have been totally feeling that as of late. I just kind of want to run away to the country and work on a piece of land. And so that's why I said I would like to explore his ideas a little bit more. But he was also very, very pro-nuclear family and very pro-marriage. And just to give you an idea of his thoughts, our former Vice President Michael Pence, he actually quoted him when he was trying to defend his Marriage Protection Amendment in 2006 when the same-sex marriage debates came up. Pence stated, quote, "Marriage matters, according to the researchers. Harvard sociologist Petiram Sorokin found that throughout history, the societal collapse was always brought about following the advent of the deterioration of marriage and family." Unquote. Bishop Sheen refers to him in our readings today on page 96. He says, "There is much truth in the thesis of Petiram Sorokin that as civilization, in the modern sense of the term, advances, there is an increase of war." That's very curious. And to explore this, I think we need to move to the next page. He says, "It is not a very sweet pill for our civilized world to swallow, to realize that the false prophets of the last century who predicted an evolution of man into a god and the necessary progress of humanity to a point where there would be no more war or disease or death or wrong. And we are now living in a century of war." So it really kind of started in the Enlightenment era. This idea that we need to, unshackle the chains of religion and be free thinkers, and we don't need religion, we don't need God. And as people started to drop that away, started to drop away religion, and this worship of science, started to take hold. That seed was planted then. Not that science is bad or that we shouldn't look to science for certain answers on things, but science really became the end-all be-all because these people were living in just the material world, because that was all there was, the material world, what you could experience with your 5 senses, and the supernatural world didn't exist. That was all just a bunch of bunk. We can't study it with our instruments and our scientific hypotheses and all of those types of things. And so as religion began to drop away and we started to advance in civilization, we started to get better in medicine, we started to get better in the field of science, biology and chemistry and physics and all of those things, there was almost this idea that we would just evolve into gods, basically. I mean, why do we even need a god? We have our own minds, really. And in a way, we've kind of become drunk on our own intellectual abilities. And we do things just because we can. We don't stop to think about if it's something we should be doing. Is it moral? Is it ethical? Well, we can, so we just should. Look at us go. And I think that's got us into a lot of trouble. And, along with this, we heard people during that time period as well talk about how religion was the cause of all wars and cause of all bad things. And so we need to get rid of it. You had philosophers out there talking about how, if we get rid of religion, then we'll really reach this utopia. We can really reach this place where everything will be perfect. There will be no more war. We can get rid of disease. And some people would like to get rid of death. And they think that that is a possibility for us as humans. But they're wrong. And what has happened is, we got rid of religion in general. We got rid of religion and stopped really looking to our faith as our, where we find our moral absolutes and our guidance for how to live in a truly civilized world. And of course, as always, something is going to take its place. And politics has. Politics has taken the place for many people as their religion. And this creates a lot of war within us and between us, right? I'm not saying we shouldn't have political parties because everybody's going to view things just a little bit differently. But it is today just a battle, a war. There is a war. We all feel the war. And there's also just war just within everything. And you can see that people have started a war against things that we have always thought of as good and true and beautiful. For instance, there is a war against the nuclear family. You even talk about the nuclear family today, people will shout you down and talk about how you're not being inclusive enough and diverse enough, and how dare you say that this is the only way that a family can be. It's insane. There's also a war against motherhood. And I can speak to this directly. As a woman, when I was younger, in my younger years, it was kind of pressed upon you that career mattered more than anything. You have got to get out there and get into the man's world and prove yourself. To sit at home and raise your kids was putting women behind by years and centuries. And how dare you do that? How dare you want to sit at home and look after your family? And so because of this, it caused women to be at war with motherhood, which makes us at war with our children. And that's why abortion is such a popular idea in many young women, because they've been taught this message. The only thing that matters is your career. And once you've established a career, if you want kids, okay. But kids are really expensive and kids are a big burden. Just remember that. And you might not get that promotion, and you might not make a lot of money, and you might not get to go on all the trips that you want to go on. But I mean, if you want to, after you have a career, okay. And so there's this real war. And so, if women have children in their 20s, they're panicking. They don't know what to do. Oh my gosh, what do I do with myself? I've ruined my life. My life is meaningless now. And so they try to do anything and everything they can to stave off motherhood. And there really is this war against motherhood. And there's also a war against masculinity. We have told men, we don't want your toxic masculinity. Get it out of here. stop mansplaining. We don't want to hear anything from you. You have no say. All we've done is listen to you throughout the centuries with the patriarchy. And so we just need you to sit over in the corner and shut up. And that's what we've told men. And there has been a real war against masculinity and fatherhood. We've told dads either we don't need you at all. And if you're around, mothers know better than you on how to do everything. So just sit on the couch and let us take over everything. Or we told dads, if you do produce a child, you don't need to take care of that kid. You owe no responsibility to that child or to the mother. And, just walk away. You don't want to be a dad anyway. You don't want that responsibility. Be as selfish as possible. And we know that it's really fatherhood and motherhood that helps us grow into women and men. It gets us out of our childish, selfish mindsets. But there really has been a war against masculinity and fatherhood. There's also a war against God and religion, specifically Christianity. People are constantly bagging on Christians in ways that I know they would never, ever speak to a Muslim in such a way. Possibly not a Jew, though it is becoming more acceptable to make fun of Jews or to criticize Jews. But still, it's amazing that there is this war on God and religion, and we're always told as Christians, you're trying to press your religious morals on me. How dare you? But the thing is okay, if I'm not allowed to press my religious morals on you, you're still going to try to press your morals, quote unquote, on me. Are you not? I mean, that's the world that we live in right now. I wouldn't call them morals, good morals. Those in the progressive mindset tend to view them as good, but they're not. They're just destruction of everything. But they're trying to force them on us. And we see this time and again. So just because I may not be putting my religious morals on you, don't think that somebody else isn't trying to force their ideas and opinions on somebody else. And what we should be doing is looking at people's ideas and thoughts and weighing them in a debate on what is best and what is most good and what is most true. But we're not even allowed to do that. And now we have this war on America, where we aren't even allowed to be proud of our own country. We're supposed to look down on the American flag. Everything about our history is to be seen through a absolutely negative lens. There's no ability to realize that we have corrected a lot of the wrongs that were once in the past, and we've moved on, and all countries all over the world have terrible sins that they've engaged in, and we've corrected a lot of those, and we acknowledge that we were wrong. But that's not even good enough. Nothing is good enough, and it will never be good enough for some people, and until everything is just completely wiped out and destroyed, and then we're just left with a heap of ashes. And so we just see that everywhere there's just this war everywhere. No one's at peace. No one's calm. Virtues are considered laughable. Everything that is a virtue, a true virtue, is held in disdain. And everything that is a vice is celebrated. It really feels like we live in a opposite world. Like it's opposite day all the time. And it creates a lot of tension and just unease, unrest. I would gather that most of us feel like things are just teetering towards the brink of something. And it's not a good place to be. It really isn't. He says here on page 97, It behooves us all to admit that there is an evil tendency in our human nature, and that this tendency, when uncontrolled by morality and grace, will devolve more rapidly than it will evolve. And I think that's what we're seeing today. Everything seems to be happening so fast. It's like the snowball is kind of going down the hill, and just all of a sudden it just is speeding down the mountain, and there's nothing stopping it. It feels that way. And it does feel like it's devolving rapidly. He goes on, "It is our views of the human condition that have been wrong. By denying the possibility of sin and guilt, we have denied the very existence, a perversity within us, which makes war." Not all will submit to this moral regeneration through self-discipline, but those few who will be the leaven in the mass of the world. And so, it's hard to find inspiring words these days. In many ways, on my daily blog posts, my microblogs, on my social media pages, I do feel like I'm trying to inspire everybody in some way. And everybody wants a big answer to this problem that we're facing, this war that we feel that we're in, this war, these many wars that we feel that we're in. Everybody wants a big solution, a really impressive solution. And I don't know that that's quite the answer, other than what he has said here, that it has to start with each one of us. And we look at that and we think, oh man, that's just not going to cut it. It's just not going to cut it. But yes, it will. It really will. If we start with our own children and our grandchildren and ourselves, if we start to change the generations below us and teach them to join together as a family, to learn together, pick a topic, any topic, and start learning together and teaching your kids. And going to church, going to Mass weekly, it has to be part of the solution. And prayer, it just has to be part of the solution. And we know how to do it. We just have to commit to it. And that's what he says. He says, few will commit to this moral regeneration through self-discipline, but those few who will be the leaven in the mass of the world. And so this is what we have to commit to. We have to have self-discipline. We have to speak truth. We have to be willing to accept the sacrifices that come along with speaking truth. But we have to be the pushback. And we don't have to do it violently. We don't have to do it in an ugly way, but we can do it in such a way that if we do it together, it will start to make a difference. And I've said this on other podcasts. You live your life differently than the secular culture, people will notice. They may not say anything. They may even still continue to treat you bad, but a seed will be planted. I promise you that. And then we can just trust that God will help it to grow. And so I hope that's encouraging for you this week. So like I said at the beginning, take some time. There's so much we didn't cover in today's readings, and there's so much good stuff in there to think about. Definitely take some time. Go back over it. Highly encourage you to do that. But that is all for this week, and I will see you back here for week 28. And until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.